they just had to like pause, right? That was the best they could do. So they couldn't really solve their problem at all, right? Like they were just unequipped. Um,
Yeah, well, we were promised flying cars, so many times, and so I'm disappointed at Elon, like he didn't come up with anything yet, and it's just unacceptable. Mike,
Jack, happy
Thursday.
Thursday. Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, good. We're right on schedule. So we had a break, went to Dallas where thematically, okay, so
Mm,
thematically we've got a few things, but I think I've got a little theme which was contextually. I
mhm,
left Chicago, and I think it was like 100 degrees below zero or whatever it is here, always, right?
mm,
And the plane had to get de-iced, which for some reason took a long time. And they were
mm,
very nice about it. And they were just saying how, well, this plane had sat around for a day. So they really wanted to be extra cautious. I thought, okay, yeah, it kind of makes sense. You're out there, huge plane, snow,
mm,
whatever we have here in Chicago. So they de-iced it. We took off. Everything was fine. But then I get to Dallas, Dallas covered in snow. So one, weird, never rarely happens. And because of that, complete standstill. So I was there for
mm,
about a week. I think schools were closed all week. Obviously, no one could really get around because it's incredibly car dependent in Dallas.
mm,
And but at the same time, they don't have any equipment, no melting, whatever we are used to here, they don't have there. So even when I went up to my parents' house, the stoop was covered in ice, like melted ice, like in a not
mm,
fun to walk on shape. And I was sitting there
mm,
trying to like hit it with a crowbar, but it was frozen solid, right? So I kind of it was just interesting to me how and perhaps that's my overarching theme is about struggle. So in this environment, anything I could do other than I guess I'm an okay driver. Even then, all the intersections were just solid ice, right? Like it was very dramatic for a Chicagoan because I'm just not used to the streets being that
mm,
bad.
mm,
At best it's kind of slushy, but there, just literally ice. And I'm thinking, well, it's a pretty heavy car. I mean, obviously, watching TV commercials, these stupid vehicles we own are supposed to climb up mountains and stuff, right? Like it's supposed to be no big deal, but practically, I'm not used to that kind of driving, even for me. So it kind of limped along, and everybody kind of limped along, and it was fine. No mishaps. Everything was good. But I guess what I'm talking about, the struggle is that if it wasn't just going to get warm again there, which it did, and even then this stuff didn't melt very quickly, but it did. It's probably 800 degrees there now, considering how Dallas is. But
mm.
they just had to like pause, right? That was the best they could do. So they couldn't really solve their problem at all, right? Like they were just unequipped. Um,
Yeah, well, we were promised flying cars, so many times, and so I'm disappointed at Elon, like he didn't come up with anything yet, and it's just unacceptable.
Actually, sidebar. Apparently, Arthur C. Clarke, our favorite, was very keen
Mm,
on hovercrafts, right?
mm,
And since
mm.
there you go, there's your flying car, Jack. You can just have a
Yeah,
hovercraft, but yeah, hovercrafts, yeah, they're
no,
noisy.
no. It should be something cooler, something, like a roadster, but flying. Yeah.
Okay, all right. I can just see crashing and burning, which, by the way, I also saw today, which was a little bit frightening. Speaking of not being able to do anything about it, it was an electric car that skidded off the road, and of course, right in front of a camera. So I guess the
Mm,
world's covered in cameras. Anyway,
yeah.
the electric car skid off the road. The driver got out, but was trying to get the backseat passengers out, and it wasn't anything too impactful. Just ran into a fence, kind of. It's like,
Mm,
okay, this doesn't seem like a big deal, but he was panicking, trying to get the doors open, and they had those kind of doors that don't have handles. And apparently, this is one problem with electric cars is they electrify everything, and so there's like a lack of actual physical things. So someone's running along and they get a rock and they're like trying their best and finally like smash through the glass. And the thing is this car really catches on fire, like quickly begins to burn. So I'm just watching it, and of course, thankfully, these three people were rescued from the back seat, I guess, right? So this is this, big dramatic rescue. But most of the comments, this was a Reddit post, by the way, most of the comments are like, why is this car bursting into flames really quickly? Which apparently is an electric car thing. That electric cars and flying cars, Jack, I'm just trying to let you know. Let's not even go with the the plummeting to earth part is always going to be tricky for anything flying around. But yeah, it was just really surprising because
but don't you think, Mike, that that with all the AI and stuff, the AI should be preventing kind of skidding into a ditch or into a fence, right? Kind of as an emergency, maybe not a full self-drive, right? And then even if that happens, don't you think that AI shouldn't just kind of like display a blue screen or something, right? But instead it should at least open the doors, right?
Well, I can see thematically here the foolproofness or the idiot proofness of our concepts are going to be interesting, right? Because we don't really want to be in the position that Dallas was in, right? And they were not prepared in any way for that. And just because we are here, it's like, yeah, it's 50 below zero. Can you take me to the train station? Is not, you know what I mean? There's no excuse. Here in Chicago, it's got to be pretty brutal to even recognize any kind of hardship, just because, as I said, we're kind of prepared for it. So, here's the thing. I wasn't prepared just as a watcher to see a car burst into flames, even though we see it in every television drama, right? That a car skids, goes over the side and immediately explodes or something like that. And someone in the chat was I work in film, and trust me, it is actually really difficult to get a car to burst into flame. Thankfully, right? I think that's a plus, that they aren't, bombs waiting to go off. But this electric car, apparently maybe due to shorting, or I have no idea, but it also let off a lot of really very toxic looking smoke, which was even kind of worse than the flame. And that was their point. They're like, these things are not, they have a whole different set of problems.
Lithium fire is very dangerous, right? Like a lithium fire cannot be put out by water, right?
Exactly, right.
Yeah, so it's very hard, right? So all you can do is kind of suppress it, maybe. And there was some situations, I think, on the cargo ships where one of those electric cars caught on fire, and the whole ship was compromised because obviously it's spreading immediately and spraying salt water, or something that doesn't do anything. So yeah, but I mean, at least the AI should be helpful. I mean, if I can see another use case where if the AI obviously has a lot of cameras around the car, right, to kind of like to implement the driving assist. So if the AI sees somebody running with a big stone, having like face expression in panic, maybe at the very least the AI should lower the windows, right? So, if let's say something like that happens. So yeah, I guess I guess it's a good discussion.
We've got ourselves a good debate, because actually at one point, and I don't know why I wanted to ask this, just because I know you're very deep into these things. I think we spoke maybe, let's say 6 months ago, or a year, maybe it was a year ago, 6 months ago, and I recall I was pretty adamant about this, and I think you agreed, which is that models don't matter anymore, right? Like the models are pretty much as good as they're going to get. I'm gonna tell you why this matters in a second. But do you agree? Because I think you were saying, yeah, there's some minor what do we call it, purpose fit models, but even those, sort of I guess you don't need general purpose models as much as you used to, but you might need more. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, some people say that we already have, the super intelligence or AGI, right? Like artificial general intelligence, because those models, if applied correctly, they do wonders. They
Right.
can do research. So that application layer now on top of the LLMs is probably more important. And that's the agentic stuff, right? Like how do you plan the solution? How do you extract from the model, maybe the appropriate relevant memory management process, right? And everybody says now the code is generated by AI, like in most places 90%, maybe 80, maybe 100, right? So now the AI is writing code that is implementing AI. So now we are in the recursive loop. So yeah, I think that the GPT-6 or GPT-7, yeah, it's going to be probably better, slightly better, but the mathematical Olympiad, it's already the AIs are already kind of acing it, and so yeah, I don't know. I mean, it feels like for office applications, we don't need any better AI, right? Maybe we need better AI that is going to do research for us, like okay, so Einstein, okay, great, right? So now what's next? Maybe something kind of like up your alley, but maybe that, but it may not be coming from a better LLM. It might be coming from a better agentic infrastructure around the LLMs. So that is entirely possible.
Well, and I think that always becomes sort of the truth. At least that's the overall truth, if we could ever have it, is it just opens up another set of problems, right? Like that's the thing. It's
Yeah.
like, whenever you solve one, you just get to see the other one. And the other
Mhm.
ones normally aren't solution oriented to my mind. And thus I think maybe we can weave in this other thing. So we both watched Adam Neely, big huge fan, as you can tell. We are little tiny tiny um, fan. Well, whatever. Our YouTube channel compared to his is there's no comparison. Adam Neely has done YouTube, I think, for his whole, for 20 years, and does
Mhm.
amazing work about music because you're a musician and I'm not, but I am fascinated by music, and love to spend as much as time as I can understanding music. So Adam did AI uh, piece,
Mhm.
which was about, I think, I can't remember the name of it, but I think you talk about Sora. It sounds like Sora. Anyway, it's some other AI startup about music making. And so what you're supposed
Mhm.
to do is say, "Hey, I want a tune like this," and it spits a tune out, right? And to
Mhm.
my knowledge, he showed some examples, and I had seen or heard of a lot of genre music, especially country music, apparently, where AI generated songs are just as popular as any other songs
Yeah.
because the and I was going to say, go ahead and make a bunch of blues songs. It's been my experience that the problem with it is that blues songs are not hard to make, right? In fact, they're kind of designed for everyone to be able to play together pretty easily. That's the
Mhm.
design. But to be good at it is immediately obvious. Like there are some people that are amazing at it, and yet the bones of it are anyone could do it. But now it's like, no, only you can do this. And
Mhm.
that would be your Muddy Waters or your Skip James or whomever, right? Like the point is making it normal, acceptable isn't hard, and by design, I hope, right? I didn't wasn't it for release also supposed to be just for piano students? I'm pretty sure, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's not hard to play, right? Like, there's some O2, there's some pieces that are notoriously about having some incredible mastery of whatever. But some things shouldn't be hard to play because everyone has to struggle to learn how to play it all, right? And it's better to play something that sounds good, right? So,
Yeah.
so far, do you have any other takeaways before we get to our thoughts about this piece? I know he just talked about generally that making of normal music had a problem, and we'll get into the problem. But was there anything else that I missed in summarizing that?
No, this is great. I mean, it's I think that the music bifurcated a few decades ago, because maybe in the 70s, the big pieces that we are all familiar with are maybe written by John Williams, or similar, like giants of music, and they are very familiar to us because they are in the movies, right? And the only way to produce that music was with a huge 60-person orchestra, right? And you have, a section of 20 violins, right? And, 10 trumpets, and all that, and taken together, that sounds great, right? And then that has changed, maybe way before AI started, because the concept of a synthesizer has been implemented, and now you can have basically a keyboard or whatever form factor that is going to produce a wonderfully sounding string instruments or saxophones or drums, and because they were sampled digitally from original instruments, and then they were just put in on the keyboard, right? So you press C, right, on the keyboard, and that sound that comes out could be a violin or bass or whatever, right? Or a specific drum. So then there was this advent of MIDI, right? Like programming language for that, right? So
Yeah.
then there was okay, so then you can kind of write the command, press C on your keyboard and hold it for 1 second and make it 50% volume, right? Like strength
Yeah.
of the okay, that's it, right? So now you have a programming language for all that. So now it's however you play it, you can record it, on the keyboard, all the layer, the sounds, right? So now we have the bifurcation, right? You have this traditional analog big orchestra that sounds great, and maybe it's still, cannot be matched. But then you can get to 95% of that sound, in the basement with a single keyboard, right?
Mm-hmm.
And with a little laptop, right? So the question now is, we are trying to do now AI on top of that, right? So what if I can have a John Williams in the AI composing for me, and I have all the sounds that I can dream about, in my synthesizer, or in my DAW, which is basically a software that enables you to record on your computer. So yeah, where this is going, right? Who owns what, right? And there is a good debate here going in that video that you shared with me, and I think we're going to talk about that.
100%. So the thing that we maybe, and I find this is something that goes on in my head, so forgive me, which is it's really hard to use the word AI sometimes. And the reason why is that as you are the master of and have spent your life in what I will always call ML, right? Because machine learning is really good at taking tons of, I guess, anything, right? Tons of, well, let's say tons of singular things, right? And then being able to make sure that, hey, I can recognize this singular thing. And actually, maybe you could give me a better definition of machine learning, because it is underpinning a lot of what people would call AI, right? Honestly,
Yeah. So,
I don't want to mischaracterize it, but I know the thing is that it was an enormous effort to put millions and millions of examples of X to create a model so that this thing now knows what X is. Is that kind of close? I don't know.
Yeah. So talking about the music, right? Like, let's say
Yeah, music, sure.
everybody knows the opening theme, from Star Wars, right? Everybody on the planet probably knows that, right? So
Right.
it's a pattern, right? It kind of has a collection of notes, right? Those collection of notes can be put into a machine learning algorithm, so that that machine learning algorithm is going to output something for us. So what would be useful, for us? Well, it would be useful, maybe a variation of that pattern that makes sense, right? So if I put, these kind of musical patterns that are wonderful and everybody loves them, because there's also something to be said, like what actually makes a musical pattern something that you remember, that you like, right? Versus
Sure.
maybe something kind of like in a different key or in a different tempo that I don't like, right? I mean, maybe it wouldn't be attractive, yeah? But certain composers like John Williams, even with one or two notes, like the theme from the Jaws movie, like dum 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 dum.
Right, right.
I mean, there's nothing in that, but it's probably music, and it's probably great. Right. So
Well,
how,
as you
how
said, it had a tone which we could go
Mhm.
into as well. But tone to
Mhm.
me is really
Yeah.
what's happening here is well, so just back to ML, because I do know, and I'm pretty sure that all the music companies figured out long ago how to scan things
Mhm.
online to find copyrighted works, right? So there's this
Mhm.
thing of like that could just be a one-to-one pattern matching, right? Like we have the recording, go seek out that recording. But I would assume
Yeah.
ML would make that a little bit easier, or was anything fancy needed? Because that does seem like a really hard problem to solve. Take all of recorded music and make sure you're not using any of it.
Yeah. So let's go back to ML, right? So we
Okay.
we 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 are gonna plug in something into the ML, like a musical theme, right? Or a million of them, right? So
Yeah.
then the question, what can we get out of the machine learning algorithm, right? Well, we can take something that you are saying, like a classification, like a flag, like, hey, yes, I know that piece, it's already in my memory, right?
Ah,
So you are copying somebody else because I have something that is already stored in my machine learning algorithm, and it's like 67.8% similar. And then let the
okay.
lawyers decide, if this is really similar enough to be plagiarism or not, right? Right.
Right.
So that's kind of like a classification problem. Like, oh, okay, I found something similar, or maybe it's dissimilar. But also, ML can produce a new synthesis, right? Like, hey, I got the John Williams themes, I got, maybe 10 other composers, I plug them into ML, and then my task formulation for the ML is create a something new that is a synthesis of all
Hmm.
those patterns, right? And that would be basically a generative task where we want to create something new, right? So there is a number of ways that we can kind of use ML, but there is always this kind of process where we have to supply it with some sort of an input, train it, right, so that it kind of digests it, so that algorithmically now it can handle it pretty much like a human brain, and then when it's ready, then we can kind of give it a task, right? Like, and again, I think we identified like two major tasks, right? One is labeling, right? Classification, right? Is it similar, right? Or like, is it good, right? You can ask the AI after plugging in, all the cool music. You can ask the AI, hey, is this pattern that now I'm plugging into the AI, given the presence of John Williams, Hans Zimmer, and all the greatest, is that a good music, right? And the AI is going to provide you an answer. Well,
Hmm.
it's good because it has this feature, that feature, and that feature, right? So there is a wide range of ML applications there.
Well, so you brought up what I think is interesting too about so ML being just trained on a lot of stuff
Mhm.
might be able to say, hey, because I do kind of recall this, by the way, from the early days of Pandora. Anyone remember
Mhm.
Pandora? So what Pandora did is it hired a bunch of musical college students, I guess, to go in and make micro genre decisions about music that they were listening to. So basically a classification done by humans, just so that we didn't have rock, country, blues. You see what I mean? Like there's a very probably generic enough so that an algorithm could say, oh, it sounds like a country song, right? Like whatever that might sound like, it has some kind of sound. Just like just like polka, I mean, once you hear polka, it's pretty hard to say, oh wow, what is that? That's so strange. Is that classical? Is that jazz?
Yeah.
It's like, no, it's polka.
Exactly.
Like we all know it's polka, but why? Well, maybe the ML has some timing interval that I don't know, whatever. There's some definition in these trainings that says what music that we consider maybe ephemeral, what it is. So if I went to see a performance, and I'm not the person to talk to, but I tend to see performances of improvised electronic or experimental music. 3 genres that to me are almost unidentifiable because you never know like what that would sound like. It would sound probably, and I have had it where people are sort of banging on a electric guitar with mallets and then having a little squonk. Anyway, whatever, stuff like that, right? Where there's no identifiable rhythm, meter, etc. So I went out and saw a couple of friends play the other night, and brought somebody along who was literally in torture the entire time. Couldn't tolerate, which I don't blame him. It was a little dull. One of the pieces, the guy went on a little too long, which is the problem with experimental improvisational music, is that, okay, we're done. You know what I mean? Like, it's really hard sometimes to know. And they kept fading out and fading. Anyway, long story short, in extreme pain. And I was interested. That was the most interesting thing to me, because I was like, oh yeah, I mean, yeah, it wasn't the best. I wasn't, blown over. But I think it was because it just didn't have any, like, no reference point. Maybe I can tie this back into Dallas. Like, hey, it snowed. That's it. All bets are off. We have no way of dealing with this, so we're not going to, right? And I'm surprised because to me it wasn't that hard to get up and walk to the store or do I could do things, and I did, because so what, right? It's just some snow on the ground. It's not dangerous. Which, by the way, slight tangent, I do watch way too many weird videos, but watched a video about someplace in Russia where it's constantly negative 30 below zero. And it was about the people who lived in this town, which is a big town packed with people, right? With everything. And they just said, yeah, you need extremely good clothes. You can never expose your face for more than 15. It's like they just said, well, these are the rules, but we're all really nice to each other and everybody has a great time. And I thought, well, there you go. That's even more bizarre, right? Because at least for you and me, I feel cooped up in the wintertime, right? Like, I don't get out that much. Anyway, so this not being prepared, the reason why I thought it was interesting is that there's the ability to understand the norms of a genre and repeat those norms. And so Adam got into this thing that he said people are making all this music through prompts, which I think is interesting because words and music make a song about me going to talk to Jack at my weekly meeting, and I'm sure as prompt, and make it in the blues style. I am positive that this generative AI could come up with something completely passable, right?
Yeah. I mean, going back for a moment to the Pandora time and the issue that you mentioned. So there's really only a couple of things that you can do if you want to classify music, right? So you can have a bunch of experts that are going to listen to something, and they're gonna have a list, and they're just gonna assign. So you create a database manually, basically, right? So maybe it's a little bit easier because maybe a country music artist is never going to produce a classical piece. So it's very easy to classify just maybe by an artist, for example, right? But sometimes you have to listen to it, and maybe it's about rhythm, maybe it's about something else, right? But then you might have like additional information, right? Like from the artist itself, right? So this is the case that Dream Theater is a kind of a primary example of. Like you have the lead guitarist in Dream Theater, which is everybody, I think, probably thinks that it's a progressive rock band, right? And but the Dream guitarist will say, and I've heard him on many occasions saying that they are metal band. Right. And they are absolutely not like Metallica. They are absolutely not like, Megadeth. They are not certainly anyway close to the kind of mainstream of heavy metal. But, the guitarist says, hey, we are metal band. Everybody else that listens to their music know that they are prog rock, right? And then you might be a poor classifier working for Pandora, trying to figure out what actually going to be the bucket that this music is supposed to assign to. Because if you misassign, right, that's a business decision, right? Because chances are that Metallica people are not listening to Dream Theater too much, which means that they would lose revenue because they, if I am interested in metal, right, I'm, or maybe prog rock, might be missing my favorite band or potentially a favorite band from the classification that they made, so I will never listen to them, right, on that system. So yeah, it's a little bit of a tricky thing, but I think AI here would be actually fabulous for this, right? The ML, the classification, because it will look at the rhythm, it will look at the
right. It's kind of like dissecting it, right?
Yes, yeah.
And okay. Well, because there's a lot of interesting stuff there, because at least in my musical exploration, because I like to make playlists, and what I've learned lately is because all music is available, what I really want is sort of to spend some time in a genre with let's call it the shining moments of that genre, at least according to me. And so I would say for a major topic like blues, I've got at least 5 blues playlists, because there's at least, to me, 5 cultural genres of blues that I consider very, very different from each other, and they sound different, and they have obviously different performers. So you could say there's Delta blues, that's, a certain time, a certain place, and a certain group of people. And then you can have Chicago blues, which, is very much, about this particular time, place in Chicago around the 60s. And that's, to me, what music sort of is, right? Anytime you can have a genre, it starts out probably as a cultural thing. The culture supports it. People get excited about it. I think anyone who's a Beatles fan might have heard of Lonnie Donegan, who had this skiffle sound. It was like doot doot doot, and it was kind of a folk sound, and I don't know where he got it from, but he played the Rock Island Line, which, again, another Chicago Rock Island Line came right over here. So he would play this Rock Island Line, and basically it was really upbeat and had very simple instrumentation. So at the time, people were like, I can play that, right? And therefore that was kind of the birth of rock, the rock subgenre in England at the time, right? Similar with us is that, Elvis heard Little Richard, and it's that same sort of thing. It's like, oh, wow, I can sort of take this prototype and I can do it, I can do it too. And we can all do it. It's easy, it's very hard to do the John Williams thing, right? The second trombone player is not playing that, big a part.
Yeah. But I like what you said about the Beatles and those early kind of foundations of modern music, especially like the kind of like a popular music, right, pop music and stuff, right? So it seems everybody kind of says like all the musicians that I know of, they often have interviews and they kind of say, oh, there's Jimi Hendrix and I listen to him a lot, and his ideas are in me, right? Then there is obviously the Beatles that came up with so many themes that they are being kind of like foundational for a lot of modern music. Then there is Led Zeppelin and Deep Purple, all the giants, early giants that really invented a lot of things in the music. So people feel very comfortable referring to them for inspiration at the very least, right? And now we have the AI, right, that is kind of doing exactly the same. It's ingesting those patterns, that exist, about, all, that characterize all these musical genres. And now it's kind of a lot less okay to kind of like being able to kind of say that, hey, I have this AI thing, and I'm really using it to create new new kind of ideas and kind of put them on, into my synthesizers, right? So it's kind of the same process, right? I mean, you kind of used Led Zeppelin or Jimi Hendrix in your kind of like biological brain processes to create your own music. But now we have a very similar situation with AI, and it's a lot less okay. And I don't know how to kind of judge this, but it seems like we are making a full circle, kind of a little bit, because perhaps music has stagnated for a little bit. There was not too many great concerts like, Genesis Wembley concert that I can see happened recently. There's not so many great, kind of maybe, Deep Purple scale or AC/DC scale concerts where, you kind of put make the concert on a basically on the landing strip in an airport, and enough people come that feel it, right? It kind of seems like maybe it's kind of more like a show, maybe for very, very young, teenage people that kind of are there maybe less for the music but more for the show. But in terms of music, I feel like I see less, right, of greatness. And maybe AI will kind of improve that.
Well, we'll see. I mean, the spark, I know one of the biggest sparks in me exploring making these playlists was James Brown. So when James Brown's music hit Africa, which is a very, very big place, right? Every single place, every musician around there embraced that, right? So now during that time in the 70s, you go over and every musician was imitating them, just much as we're talking about the Beatles or anybody, everyone wanted to be the Beatles. And so they all did, and they all imitated, and that created, again, these kind of like, I don't know, roots, here's a root of a sound. And what happens, and I do agree with you, is that for the most part, they play out, right? Like, you just don't get, what do we get? 10 years of the Beatles, weirdly enough, right? They weren't around that long. And they broke up, and nobody sits here and really like goes nuts over the Ringo Starr solo career. You know what I mean? It's just sort of like, okay, yeah, they had this thing. As a thing, it was incredible, and then they were kind of fine. You know what I mean? Like they were, they weren't the Beatles anymore, right? And their influence was definitely less. So I was thinking of any concert I'd seen recently that I thought was impactful, and one was actually a concert with a guy who was in a band called Sonic Youth. Sonic Youth. Anyway, New York, noisy band. He was the guitarist, but he just he performs with a violinist, and what they do is drone music, and drone music is just that, right? It's just kind of it's like one sound where they're like. And what's fun about drone music, at least in my experience watching him and her play, was it takes a little while. Like it takes about 30 minutes of this to kind of get used to this kind of music. And then what happens is it just sort of goes to another level, or it doesn't, right? Like somehow things just begin to click. And because it is completely improvised, right, you also can't really record it, because it is about being in this place with this level of loudness, etc. So I went to my afterwards. I was really enjoyed this concert because I was like, oh yeah, I'm really surprised, because that's kind of what you're going for, right? You want to experience, you want to have an experience. You don't just want to hear the tunes. At least for me, I'm certain if I went and saw McCartney, he would do back in the USSR, and you know what I mean? And I'd be like, okay. And he would probably play them exactly like their sound from 50 years ago, right? Maybe very small variations. But if you're talking about, I don't know why if it's significant or not, but watching Prince Once Upon a Time play While My Guitar Gently Weeps, this is sort of a famous, like, no one expected this, but then there's this guitar solo of Prince showing off that he is indeed the, you know, the heir to Hendrix and whatever, like that he's the goat now or whatever. That and it's a fine performance. I don't have any, and I'm a huge Prince fan in all ways, shapes, or forms. But do you see what I mean? It was like taking something out of context. It's not his song, right? And it was all those people on stage just basically playing Tom Petty and all those guys that they can play this tune without going overboard, where it was the person going overboard, which was Prince, that is what became notable. And everybody then was like, oh, this is something unique. This is something special. And I think that's the hard thing about when things have been heard over and over again. And I'm going to pick on country music because one of my biggest fun playlists was a country playlist, because country music, I was going to say, used to be great. Like it had plenty of variety, had plenty of personality, and it had its own sort of character. And blues music, if you go back, wasn't blues. It was just another kind of music, right? Everybody was just playing music is the point, and all of it kind of came from various little things that were overheard or various this and that. And you learned how to play them, but then the genreification of things is kind of when it gets boring, right? So that's the thing, is like, if you go see a metal band today, back to where you were at, you kind of know what you're going to get. And that, in many ways, at least for me, is boring, right? Like I don't want to hear the album, which is what happened to me in seeing some performers play, right? I was like, yeah, you play this because it is almost, you're playing to a recording of this record most of the time with a little bit of fills so that you can run around and so to me, like, I think there's some the commodification of different genres is kind of a bad thing, and we need a new genre. And maybe it's AI. That would be wild, but then AI's got to be really odd, right? Like, and I think that's where Adam kind of fell apart. He's like, most people who make AI music, who is the person to listen to this music? They are the person to listen to this music. And that's when I got really concerned, right? Because, yeah, navel gazing, that's our thing, right? Like, we can get very inward, and music brings us out and brings us into different cultures and relays different, without punk music as a kid, right? Like, you didn't know what was happening in the world until you heard the music. Right? Because I didn't live in England. I didn't live in New York, right? Like, but you heard the music and you're like, oh yeah, I'm going to start a band, or Minneapolis, interestingly enough, the bands that started there, Prince, who heard whomever, right? But nobody in Minneapolis is some music superstar, right? But and the punk bands there, Husker Du and some of those early bands, right, were all just, oh, we just heard this and now we want to do it, and we're going to do it in our own way, and we're going to do it. I don't know, that's what's exciting, right? Is like, something starts out, it's new, it's novel, it's fresh, everybody wants to do it, and then you start to see all these facets of it, and then it evolves into being boring, and then you have to do something else.
Yeah. Well, I think that AI might be kind of like maybe predestined to do a little bit better in some areas, like the cyberpunk kind of related genres might be kind of a very good fit for AI, because of the kind of natural proximity, I guess, to stylistic and approaches. So yeah, I see what you're saying, but I am different, right? So personally, I'm kind of looking for something that I know, right? So I would
Sure.
be careful to go to a concert that I, like especially those concerts where
Yeah,
people
you
use
would
like,
not. No one would like these concerts that I go
yeah,
to.
like especially, like in the electronic music genre, if they are using Buchla, which is basically a synthesizer that doesn't have any keys, it just has wires that you kind of stick into different places and knobs that you turn, right? So it's not even
Oh
a
yeah,
Moog.
I go to a
It's
lot of those. A lot of
yeah,
knob
yeah.
turning for sure.
Yeah, so I would be, it would be a little bit dangerous thing for me to go to, right? I'm kind of the I like to listen to things that I listened to, for many decades, right? Like I have my
Sure.
favorite albums, like from Genesis or Tangerine Dream, or some early metal maybe, right? Like Motorhead, early Motorhead, Lenny Kilmister,
Totally.
like
Yeah.
so something like that, right? And I continue listen to it, but I try to be open to the new stuff, and I'm kind of, most of the time I'm disappointed, and maybe it's not because the music is not good, right? Maybe it's just me who is so used to patterns that I've been trained on, right? So to speak, right? I mean, from the early days, right? I love Gershwin, and that's those chords and those landscapes are kind of really resonating with me, and maybe kind of like some other composers a lot less, right? So that is, yeah. So it would be ideal for me if I could
Yeah.
talk to
No.
my AI and kind of like give the AI, the music that I listen to, and then, hey, give me something like extrapolation, right, of that particular mix, right? It would be wonderful.
Well, and on the converse, so I see the converse, which is that
Mhm.
I think there's always room to use the things that you love to discover new things, right? Because the if you love something, somebody else loves it, and then someone else can be inspired by it. So it's why, there's wonderful works of art in the museum, but that doesn't mean that all works of art need to be in a museum. You know what I mean? That there
Mhm.
can be new art, right? It will, however, take a little bit of context that you have to bring to it, right? Which is that if you go to see some art and turns out that it's just a pile of candies lying in the street,
Mhm.
many people would just be find that to be way too random. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't have any real context for them to enjoy it or appreciate it or even make any sense of it. But when you take that pile of candy and you put it in the Art Institute, it is a Felix Gonzalez Torres piece, right? And that has all this history idea. It became something else, and I'm a big fan of that. But just like if you went to the concert hall, and I went to the concert hall, I didn't see a band, but it was a big concert to see David Sedaris, the writer. And he came out and he read some of his work. And I found it supremely disappointing because he reads his work quite often. In fact, that's kind of his claim to fame is that I saw him actually perform his first performance doing his thing. I saw him ages ago before he became famous and doing the piece that is his most famous piece. And it was great because I was there and it was hilarious, and it was a very small crowd. And he's just this guy telling this very funny story. And here he is in front of thousands reading his stories, which are very funny. But I was like, oh, well, there's nothing different about this. You see what I mean? So
Mhm.
when I'm looking for music, often I am going to try to seek out like where do musicians play music with each other. So I do see jazz quite a bit, right? I want to do something where they're not just playing to us, they're playing to each other. That to me is kind of what music is. like it's a relationship. My daughter's in a band, who's really good, by the way. But she was trying to talk about to her drummer, and she said, "Can you give me an example? Because she plays too much." Always a problem, right? And she's like, "Playing too much. Do you have any inspiration?" And of course, I immediately just thought of Al Green and Al Green's drummer, Al Jackson. And the thing is, Al Jackson does not play very much, but there is 100% drumming on this track. Like this drum is extremely prominent, right? It's not in the background. It's not, some guy. It's not Keith Moon. It's,
Mm.
you know what I mean? It's not that kind of where they have to turn it down. It's way up in the mix, but it's very spare. And when he hesitates or puts it, like every little bit counts. And there's also his brother, the guitarist, who once in a while will play a little bit of guitar. And to me, it's interesting, right? Because it's like, well, how would you? It's hard to anyone to emulate this, because that's, I would think, even bigger problem for AI, right? Which is, how do you know what not to do?
Mm.
How do you know where real tension can be created by leaving things out? Or making mistakes. I guess that was the real theme of today, which was struggling, because I'm struggling on this piece. I've rewritten it 10 times and it's still not quite right? Like working on something over and over and over again, to me, I think was his biggest takeaway, right? Like music isn't about making music. It's about figuring out your own voice, if you have one. And figuring out your voice can kind of take a while. I don't know why it's only 18-year-olds seems to have figured all this out, right? Because isn't that the thing about bands, right? They're all like babies, and yet, they write these really sophisticated ideas and can play their instrument or whatever, and then you're like, wow, you would think it would be better, if all the musicians were in their late 50s, but apparently not, right? It's maybe they're just
Yeah.
producers.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like, that's a good point, right? I mean, maybe the AI should be focusing on producing, right? Because, like, the many of the greatest songs are actually maybe the kind of like their fingerprints of a producers that are kind of deciding factors, right? Like, I mean, Michael Jackson could be, a very good example, right? I mean, without Quincy Jones, Michael Jackson wouldn't sound the way he sounded.
No.
So, yeah.
Well, or your favorite, I don't know if you know the Phil Collins story of In the Air, was that they made a mistake and they had routed a drum sound through the mic PA,
Yeah.
which basically became the sound of the 80s of the gated snares, right? Like that the gate shut, and that made the reverberation not happen, and that became a decade of music.
Yeah.
But it was a mistake,
Yeah.
I kind of lean toward that being the thing that I do in my work personally, is to try to set something up so a mistake or something new could happen, right? Something different could happen. I think that concert that I saw, both of them were pretty surprised, because I think they were about to call it quits, because you're making a lot of racket for about an hour long, whatever, for an hour with your guitars and, reverbs and, all this pedal stuff going on. But then you could hear it turn, and you could see them recognize that it turned, because once you get resonances, right? Resonances begin to form. And if you ever listen to Indian music, it's a lot like this. You kind of are creating a space of sound, and metal does too, right? I mean, isn't that the point of a lot of this stuff? It's just loud enough that you can feel it rather than hear it. And you should wear earplugs too, because you need to preserve your hearing.
Yeah.
But it's creating the resonances that actually is that then people start to lean in, and that has There's a fantastic YouTuber called Dave Rat, who is a sound production engineer who does all sorts of demonstrations about how sound is mixed live. And he is a pretty illustrious live sound producer guy. And to me, that's endlessly fascinating about cancel nodes and basically, you know, all the trickery that goes into making something sound good.
Hmm.
You
Well, it
know,
clearly sounds to me that we need at least another session on music and AI.
100%. Well, and we'll see. Maybe that would be a fun homework. We'll both go try this thing and have it make a song. And we can play it for each other, and you can you can probably prompt it fairly well with your favorite, you know, touch points, and have it, you know, come up with something. And I will struggle, but I'll try it. How's that?
Yeah, sounds great.
All right, Jack. As always, have yourself a wonderful week, and glad to be back.
Yeah. It's great to be back, and yeah, let's talk next week.
Next week.